Hey everybody, we have reached the final weekend before Election Day, and yesterday I had a video where I kind of analyzed the data, the early voting data coming out of some of our key states, Florida, North Carolina, and Nevada. I linked that video in the description below. But today I wanted to go through what we know so far in the state of Pennsylvania. Now, I didn't go through Pennsylvania yesterday, particularly because we don't really know what's going on in terms of early voting in person data. What we have in Pennsylvania is mainly mail in votes, and for our purposes, that doesn't really paint the entire story. But I did want to go through it because it is such an important state in this election cycle, and there is some data we can analyze with mail-ins, and I wanted to kind of give my thoughts on what that kind of data means uh, up to this point in Pennsylvania. Um, Now, I have for you right now the 2016 electoral map and the county map from Pennsylvania, a state that Donald Trump won by a little under 50,000 votes. Now, mainly what we're talking about in Pennsylvania is going to be the Philadelphia area and the Philadelphia suburbs. Berks County, particularly Lancaster and York counties. You've heard a lot about the Philly suburbs, the Western Philly suburbs. They were the counties that won Donald Trump, Pennsylvania, back in 2016. Just a lot of the vote coming from there, as well as a couple of areas around Pittsburgh, particularly Butler County and Westmoreland County. Those were some big counties around Pittsburgh. For Joe Biden, he'll be looking to pick off the mainstay areas, the area around Pittsburgh, Allegheny County, as well as the area around Philadelphia, Chester County, Delaware County, Philadelphia County, Montgomery County, and Bucks County. Those are where Joe Biden will look to pick off most of his votes. And right now, as I said, in Pennsylvania, we don't have a lot of data other than mail in data, but it is still important to take a look at it. I think no matter how you slice it, Pennsylvania, aside from there are obviously some scenarios on both sides where Pennsylvania is rendered unimportant. But I think for the most part, if we're looking at a closer election, even a close-ish election, it doesn't need to be a very tight election for Pennsylvania to be important. But in my opinion, we are going to have an election where Pennsylvania is of monumental importance to either candidate. So I think it's important here, the final weekend before Election Day, to take a look at where we stand right now in Pennsylvania. And so I'm pulling up what we know so far, and that's mostly, again, the mail-in ballot data. And in terms of mail-in returns, we see that the Democrats have nearly a million vote lead on mail-in ballot returns. And on paper, when you just look at mail-in ballot returns, that looks like it's a huge deal. And I'm not going to say it's not a huge deal. It's something that the Biden campaign has to be happy to see. But I want to put it in perspective because we don't know what's going on with early in-person voting. And as I went through in my video yesterday, in North Carolina, in Florida, in a lot of these key battleground states, Democrats are jumping out to a big lead because of mail-in voting, but Republicans are chipping away and narrowing that lead when it comes to in-person voting. And it tracks with what we've seen from polls, where Democrats are more likely than Republicans to vote by mail, while Republicans their preferred method of voting is in person, and a lot of them prefer to vote in person on Election Day. What we're going to have to wait for is just how many vote on Election Day, and will it account for the amount of cushion the Democrats build up leading up to Election Day, specifically with mail-in voting. So since we don't know that data right now from Pennsylvania in person wise, we can only look at these mail-in ballots, and we have to put it in perspective. So again, we have about a million vote lead, a little under a million votes lead by the Democrats in Pennsylvania. Now let's look at where that vote is coming from and see if it tracks with what we know from the 2016 data. So here's where we're going to look at. We're going to look at where the most requests for mail-in voting, for mail-in ballots have been made, so we can see where a lot of that mail-in vote is coming from. So if you're the Biden campaign or if you're the Trump campaign, you're hoping most of those mail-in requests are coming from this area around Philly, as well as this area around Pittsburgh. If it's coming from those two areas, it tracks with 2016, where we have a big Democratic area over here and over here, assuming, of course, Pennsylvania is tracking with the trend that Democrats like to vote by mail more than Republicans. What you're also hoping for if you're the Trump campaign is that there haven't been a lot of requests made in these Philly suburbs, as well as Butler County and Westmoreland County. You're hoping that there's still a lot of the vote that has not been made in those counties. So let's take a look at request rates. And if you notice right off the bat, the darker shades, of course, meaning where most of the electorate, it's the higher percentage of the electorate that have requested ballots. So you notice right off the bat the darker shades where they're coming from. Montgomery County, Chester County, those are the big counties from 2016 for the Democrats, as well as over here in Allegheny County, right around Pittsburgh. Again, that is a big Democratic stronghold. So I think that tells me that it's tracking with 2016, that those are where the Democrats are going to get a lot of their votes, and it's tracking early on. As we also see some shading here, Center County, which again went just narrowly to Hillary Clinton in 2016. And again, it's not as heavily shaded as these other areas, so it is more of a toss-up county. Now let's take a look at those Philly suburbs: Berks County, Lancaster County, York County. Here so far, we have about 30% of registered voters having requested ballots in Berks, a little over that in Lancaster, and about 31% in York. Here in Westmoreland County, we have about 30%, and in Bucks County, under that, about 28%, almost 29%. So that's tracking, because that means if we follow the philosophy that Republicans are going to wait to vote in person, it makes sense that those counties that Trump won back in 2016 aren't requesting as many mail-in ballots, particularly because of the rhetoric spread by the Trump campaign that mail-in balloting is not as reliable. So you expect that his voters will follow that mantra and look to vote in person, whether that's early or on election day. So my key takeaway with Pennsylvania to this point is that it is tracking with 2016. Now, it can track with 2016 and not be good news for the Trump campaign, because again, he only won that state by about 50,000 votes. So even if it's tracking with 2016 data, it doesn't mean he's guaranteed to win Pennsylvania, but I think the Trump campaign will look at it as good news, that mail-in ballots are coming from the counties that Hillary Clinton won in 2016, and there is still a lot of the vote left to be cast in those Philly suburbs and in those Pittsburgh suburbs areas. And that, for me, is good news if you're the Trump campaign, but it's not necessarily bad news if you're the Biden campaign, because you are seeing that the vote from those areas that you need the vote to come from, Allegheny County, Chester County, Montgomery County, and Philadelphia County, as well as Bucks County, your base, whether it's by mail or not, it is coming out for you in Pennsylvania. So I can see this being good news on either side, no matter, depending on how you want to spin it. It is still a tight race in Pennsylvania. The Democrats, while it looks like they're that this million vote ballot request lead over registered Republicans is a doomsday scenario for the Republicans. It's not necessarily the case. Without knowing what the in-person data is, and especially without knowing what it's going to be like on election day, we can't really make a good assumption on how Pennsylvania is voting. But it is good news for the Democrats that at least they have built that cushion in mail-in balloting, and it is coming from their areas. And if you're looking at it from the Republican standpoint, there's still a lot of the vote left in those Philly suburbs, those Pittsburgh suburbs, and maybe you're looking at not as many votes on election day coming out of the Philly city area as well as Allegheny County. So maybe less of the vote for Joe Biden to come out on election day. Still a good lead though for Joe Biden or the Democrats right now, based on mail-in voting. Again, I think Pennsylvania is going to be the do-or-die state for either candidate, assuming something else big doesn't happen around the map. Of course, if, say, Texas goes to Joe Biden, then I'd say Pennsylvania is the least of our concerns. But if the map plays out around the area that I think it will play out, then I think we're looking at Pennsylvania being of monumental importance in this campaign, in this election. That's it for this video. Please subscribe, place a like,